Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is a life and leadership podcast where we're exploring the lessons that we're learning and living out loud from the books on our bookshelves. We are in the middle of exploring the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. Really looking forward to this episode because we're starting now into the second law of the book. The summary of what we're going to be talking about today is really about how to have behavior change to make the habits that we have in our life more attractive and what it's like when we have some feedback loops of making those dreams become real and those habits to become habitual in a good way, and how to bundle together the things that we're doing in life. I'm really excited to once again be here with my co-host and friend, Sam Powell. Sam, it's great to have you here today.
Good to be here with you as always.
As always. So tell us a little bit about where we're at today, because we're moving now into a second law of this book. It feels like we've been in this book for quite a while and we're really just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, exactly. So we came from the first law, which was make it obvious, right? So this was, how do you put all those triggers in your environment to cue you into stepping into this habit that you want to form. And this is the second law of make it attractive. So James's concept is the more attractive an opportunity is, the more likely it is to become habit forming, right? So we've made something obvious. It's in our environment. It's in our face. It's all around us. And now that we see it, we're making ourselves want it, right? We really want to hop into it. And James starts out this chapter with a couple of stories, but one is about the food industry, the modern food industry. And Denise, you were saying that this one resonated with you.
Yeah, this one resonated with me because it's really what the grocery stores have found to be their way to market to consumers the best. In fact, it's funny because just yesterday I saw a new group on Facebook or Instagram or something like that where it was talking about the habits people have of going through this one specific aisle at a grocery store called Aldi's. And the video was talking about how Aldi's puts these items that nobody has on their grocery shopping list, really, but they put them front and center. They make it attractive the way they set up the aisle. It's exactly when you walk in the store, it's the first thing you see. And it's also the last aisle you see when you go up to the cash register. And what James talked about in this chapter was that there is certainly science behind that grocery stores use to make their items irresistible. In fact, when you think about items on shelves that are at your height level, they're usually the name brand items. In fact, brands have to pay extra money to have their items placed on certain shelves. I think even in bookstores, that's probably true. When I think about recently I went to Barnes & Noble with Olivia, and I noticed that there were certain books that were faced like out, where you could see the whole cover versus just the spine. And it got me curious to thinking, okay, either the booksellers know those are the books they want to sell, or they're books that maybe publishers paid money to have front and center. And even when you walk into the store at Barnes & Noble, the very first thing you walk into are books on sale. So maybe they're the books they want to get rid of, but they make it really attractive, like buy one, get one free, or, buy this and get two more free. And so you end up going away with way more than you had on the list to begin with. But what also struck me in this chapter, it's not just about the placement of the items on the shelves, but it's also the science of how to make items that are on the shelves more attractive to the customer. So James talks about things like commercials even. So when you look at a commercial on television and you hear the crunch of a potato chip, or if you've ever been to the movie theater and right before they turn the lights all the way off, Coca-Cola typically is like a sponsor. And so you'll hear this pouring of Coca-Cola over this glass of icy cold drink. And it makes you thirsty just even watching it. And that's the science called oral sensation. And so you've got companies that make food, not just advertise food, that think truly about that, like French fries, for example. When you think about your favorite fries, that Olivia's favorite food of all times is French fries. And so we actually go sometimes on vacations just built around places she's researched that are known to have the best French fries, because there's this combination of something crunchy and something soft, I suppose, that you could say, or creamy or light and smooth on the inside. And that dynamic contrast is what James says is attractive. So this chapter is all about making things irresistible and attractive and not bland and not boring. And how do we actually do that to combine things together? Now, you taught us last time, Sam, about the importance of combining our actions for habits. And I wonder if this isn't still the same, because you were talking about in our pre-call, the combination of things may make things even more attractive when you pick out things you want to have versus maybe the things you need to have.
Yeah. And I think, right, if we're talking about like the food industry and then sensation, right? That oro sensation is how food feels in your mouth, and how it's that combination of the dual sensations. It's super, super attractive. And so like really understanding, I don't know, what triggers for you those like pleasure, like those pleasure feelings, right? Which is like, it's triggered by, dopamine's one of the big things in our brain chemistry that does that. But like, what are those things that give you that hit that's like, ooh, yeah, like I love to crunch on things. Like me, I love, like, if anybody ever asks me what my guilty pleasure food is, like my answer is Big League Chew gum. I love to chew gum. I like that sensation of moving my mouth. It's probably why I'm a real talker. Like I like that sensation. And so I realized at one point I was snacking on a lot of really unhealthy things, right? M&Ms and candy and, chips and all that sort of good stuff. And so one day I was like, well, what I actually really like is this sensation of moving my mouth. Like I get stressed out. And so therefore I need something to do. And I was like, well, I really like this gum. Like, I like the way it tastes. I like the way it feels. Like, it's great. It turns out they make it in giant buckets you can buy in like a little ball form instead of the shreds that, I think you think of when you think of the pouches. I love it. So now I keep that on my desk, and it's my favorite thing, but it's that, it's the combination of how that feels. It's got sweetness. It's got kind of a creamy feel to it, but it gives me that like chomp, 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 chomp feeling that I really like. And it gives me that kind of hit of dopamine that I need when I'm like, stressed out, things are happening, need to do something. It's like, well, let me chew some gum. Chomp, chomp.
Okay. But then I'm curious, because then something changes probably for you while you're chewing the gum, right? Because eventually the sugar goes away, the gum gets kind of hard maybe. So what does it feel like to you, maybe subconsciously, when you know it's time to spit it out and either get a new piece or take a pause?
I hang on to the gum way longer than I probably should. It's at that point where like, I'm not even thinking that I'm chewing it. I just continue to chew it, blow bubbles with it. Like, honestly, I'll chew it way longer. Then every once in a while I'm like, hey, man, my jaw kind of hurts. Or man, like this is getting really hard. Like it's starting to get difficult to chew. And that's when I start to slip back into like consciousness of what I'm doing, into like, oh, this is happening, right? So it moves from this like, make it pleasurable category to it's now painful. It's now on the opposite end of the spectrum. So now it's time to change that situation that I'm in.
Well, that's interesting to hear you talk about that, because even in the book, James talks about how habits can become addictions, which can become destructive. And I wonder if we even were thinking about whether it's food or whether it's gum or whether it's the way that we work in our jobs, that the things that once we started that were pleasurable become so automatic, and that we go, like you made an analogy, that you can chew the gum to the point where you don't even realize you're still chewing it, like for too long maybe, and then your jaw starts to hurt. How often do we do things where we get caught up in things at work that started out as something enjoyable, that then became a habit, that then we just added more meetings to our day and added more things on our calendar and added more stress to our pile, that then become more like addictions? Like you were mentioning earlier when we started the show, do people crave a title, or do you really love your work? And at what point does work become a destructive habit or an addictive habit, that your identity becomes built in what you do as opposed to in who you are?
I mean, you're I remember James makes the argument here that your identity is what you do, right? Like that's why he talks about identity-based habits. Like, yeah, I might think that I'm a nice person in my head, but if I go out and make everyone else feel small, then I'm not a nice person, right? That actually is not my identity. And so it's interesting, but you're using the right word. It's crave, right? I crave this thing. That's what this is, right? The first law was make it obvious, which is cue. This is make it attractive, which is crave. So when you think about what you're really trying to do here, it's you need to associate the identity you want to become, the thing you're working towards, into something you crave, right? Like if I want to be a morning person, I need to crave something that happens in the morning, right? So that I get out of bed and get moving and, doing whatever. That's really what we're talking about is this stimulus in your environment says like, hey, I should do something. But then what immediately has to follow it is that craving of I want it really bad. And if those aren't related back to the identity that you want to become, right, then you're in a bad craving situation, right? Craving isn't inherently bad or good. It just depends on if it's a craving you like or don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of moves it in whatever direction. So you're trying to create cravings on things that you want, on this identity you want to become.
I think that's important because it isn't so much maybe that you crave to be a morning person. It's that you crave to have maybe more time in your day. And in order to do that, you need to become a morning person. And so you talk a lot about your fandom of Simon Sinek, who says always to start with why. Like, why do you want to be a morning person? Like I can say confidently, I do not want to be a morning person. I don't like the mornings. I think best in the afternoons. But I recently have been given this engineered version of reality, which is what James talks about in the book, of thinking that better leaders wake up earlier. So Robin Sharma, who's a mindfulness and a coach author, wrote a book recently that's a bestseller about waking up at 5 a.m. and about how the best leaders wake up at 5 a.m. And I'm so tempted to buy the book, but I'm at the same time thinking, I don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. But James says that if you look around, society is filled with highly engineered versions of reality that are more attractive than the world our ancestors evolved in. Stores feature mannequins with exaggerated hips and breasts to sell clothes, and social media delivers more likes and praise in a few minutes than we could ever get in the office or at home. And it really got me thinking about a product that has recently surpassed $1.5 billion. And that product is a movie. And the movie was based on a character that was based on a toy that was a highly engineered version of reality that was more attractive than normal life, which was Barbie. And so when you think about Barbie from when we were kids, Barbie to me was this beautiful girl. And I didn't realize when I was a young girl that subliminally the purpose that Ruth Handler, the creator of Barbie, had was to never just make a pretty doll, but for Ruth to make a doll that was tied to a story of strong, independent, confident, somebody who could do anything. And so when the movie recently came out, in the movie, I won't give spoilers for those who maybe haven't seen it yet, but there's these two contrasting worlds, a world that was real to Barbie called Barbie Land, and then the real world that Barbie didn't live in. And what happens when she goes from this world she's only ever known into this new world that was unknown and foreign to her. And she couldn't understand why this other world was so different from the programming that she had in the original world. And so that movie now has surpassed, like I said, $1.5 billion. And what it shows is that the way in which we make things attractive dictate the way business and economy and governments work. If you see tourism, everything built around tourism advertising is around the attractiveness of a place you're going, not the behind the scenes things that maybe are a part of where you're going. I remember not long ago, we went on a trip for spring break, and I'm thinking about any numerous places we've been, but I'll point out one in specific, which was in Jamaica. In the advertisement, we were looking at a place that was all inclusive and everything you imagine a resort to be. palm trees and beaches and cold drinks and fun and beautiful people and amazing soft pillows in your bedroom. When we got to the area that we were going to at the airport, we had to take a shuttle that was a pretty far shuttle to that location. And all we passed, Sam, was destructiveness, like buildings that were half built, slums, dirt, cars that looked like they had multiple parts on them just to get them rolling down the road. And so it was curious to think that this place that people think is so glamorous and wonderful is actually also surrounded by a lot of turmoil and poverty. And so when you think about things even like social media in regards to how they attract you to things that they want you to create as a habit, research on TikTok is all about things like enjoyment and concentrating information in such a short little video that your time is distorted by watching this short thing that draws you in. And suddenly now, because that one thing drew you in, you start watching another thing and another thing and another thing. I know you were sharing with me not long ago about certain people you follow or things that subliminally pop up based on something else you follow. So I wonder, how do you, Sam, as a leader and as a mom, as a parent, as a friend, how do you limit or look at self-control when you're looking at things like social media that can really suck you in and distract you from the things you either want or need to do in your life?
Mm-hmm. I think the first step is awareness that that this is augmented reality. This is, social media, anything in the capitalist world, right? Like anything in a country where we're selling stuff. It is designed to make you want that thing, right? Like we are trying to make money. We are like TikTok wants engagement. Social media, Twitter wants engagement. The grocery store wants you to buy all the things, right? Like you have to know that that is the reality and know that it is gamified in a way that makes you want it, right? So I think that like first step is you have to wake up and be really aware to all of that. And then second, you need a way to question, right? Like once you've built awareness on something, like, oh, now my eyes are open and I can see that this is designed that, you have to find really good ways to build space between the stimulus and the action, right? And so this is the opposite of what we're doing in this chapter, right? We're making something attractive and we're going to move on to law 3, which is like the response, right? Mm-hmm. So we're on reward, like make it super attractive. And the next where we'll head in this book is response, right? The action that's associated with it. And this is the same thing if you're working on like emotional regulation, right? Like you're stimulated in a way, like I'm angry and therefore I yell. Well, if you have high emotional intelligence, you're angry, and then you have a space where you insert some thoughts, and then maybe you don't yell, right? Because you don't want to yell. You don't want to be a yeller. You want to be something different, right? So it's the same thing. You have to have awareness that you're stimulated and aware that everything around you is meant and designed very specifically to stimulate you, right? This is where social media is really dangerous for people who don't understand what social media is, people who are not good with technology, because you think, oh, this thing I'm seeing, this thing that is, coming at me is like, oh, wow, it's like, divine intervention that this thing popped up. And like, yeah, that could be true. But it's also designed based on the fact that you've been searching things that look like, this thing. So you've got to have enough space. You have to have enough realization to be able to insert enough space between the stimulation and your response. And so that's really like, to me, is the big key. And I think that's like one of the biggest secrets to life, is generating enough personal growth and enough personal development to build a lot of self-awareness and environmental awareness so that you then can move forward with the right reaction, the right action, the right movement that you want, because you have enough space in between to act in a way that you really intend. And there's tools to help you with that, right? Like I think I talked last time about how I set like a focus mode on my phone in the hours. Like I do my phone, I cannot get to any of my social media until 9:30 in the morning. So from the time I wake up until 9:30, it's grayed out. I cannot see it. And I found myself actually over the last week, since I started that part of my morning routine because I want to be purposeful with my mornings now. I found that I even turn that focus mode on when I'm realizing, oh no, I've played this game like a million times, right? I've also put that little widget on my home screen. So there's a nice picture of my husband and my children on my home screen. And then there's this little widget that tells me how much time, how many minutes I've spent on different things. And so when I see stupid game pop up or this social media pop up and it's like, you've spent 53 minutes scrolling Facebook. And I'm like, oh crap, it's 10:30. That is not good. It's only been available for me for an hour and I've spent most of that time on it. So I turn that focus mode back on because I remove the thing that's attractive, right? I remove that stimulation and it inserts just enough space where I can say, you know what, I do need the 5 minutes. And, I'm using the technology that works against me sometimes to work for me with the tools that are there to insert enough space to make the decisions I want to make.
I think what's important about what you're sharing, and I hope the listeners are catching this, is you have to be intentional with how you lead your life. And what's so interesting and yet frightening about this chapter is that James really is pointing out that dopamine, for example, which is the science of you wanting something, the attractiveness of something, these are chemical influences in our brain. These are things that you cannot avoid happening as these chemicals are influencing your actual organs in your body and in your brain. And every behavior involves so many areas in our brain where these chemicals are responding and creating these feelings that we have. And that a dopamine rush can actually turn into depression and anxiety. And James even talks about how in the chapter they were doing these tests on some rats in a science lab, that at one point they were giving these rats sugar and the rats in the beginning were craving it. And then eventually, as they got enough of the sugar over and over again, they now no longer didn't even care that they were getting the sugar, but then they just didn't even want it anymore. And then when they were being given the sugar, they just wanted to die. So imagine that. They went from wanting something so much that they were craving it to then not realizing they were getting it, to then realizing that they didn't want it anymore, so much so that they were willing to just give up on their life because that thing they originally wanted no longer was serving them. I was reading an article recently from Harvard Medical School that was talking about how social media leverages the same neural circuitry as slot machines and cocaine. Like, how frightening is that? That the same things that can addict you to gambling and drugs are the same things that social media owners, I guess you could say, the companies that run social media platforms are using the same neural circuitry to be able to purposefully create addicting habits for us. And there was a stat that said in 2005, only 5% of American adults used social media, but Pew Research did a study that says that as of 2022, it's become 72%. So you think about that, 7 out of 10 adults in America are using social media. And I'll bet it's even probably higher than that. That's just what they found in their study. But that only in 2005 was only 5%. So how fast and rapid has our society changed?
Yeah. And I mean, in 2005, what social media was there, right? Facebook came out in 2004. So like you're talking about as this thing has come up, right? So, but like, and that is terrifying. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm being manipulated by all of these things. But the point of this chapter is that this is reality. Your brain works this way. You cannot help that you see something and it triggers your brain to do something, but you can hack the system. You can drive awareness to it. You can know this is happening and you can leverage the way you work in your favor, right? And it's really interesting because when you're talking about dopamine is that, James talks about you don't even get this dopamine hit when the thing happens. You also get it when you're anticipating the thing happening. So it's not just, hey, I've gone on social media, or hey, I went for a run, or hey, I've got the analogy I always think about is like, I have a vacation coming up. It's like, I'm so excited about this vacation, gives you just as much of a hit in the, in these pleasure seeking brain chemicals as standing on the beach at your vacation being like, I'm here, I did it, I made it, right? It's awesome. Like, but thinking about like, oh, I'm going to be standing on the beach and that's going to be so great. You get the same chemical hit. And so you can hack this, right? You can use this in your favor to say, hey, remember when I think about what I get out of this, right? We're making something attractive. That's really where we're, what we're trying to do and where we're at with this. And so the thing that James ends the chapter with is around temptation bundling and really utilizing this to make you want to do something, right? So it builds off of what we did in section 1, which was habit stacking, right? Like I do this and now I do this. I brush my teeth and now I floss. It's actually bundling in and adding on some pleasure into that, right? So it's, I have this current habit and next, right after that, I will do this habit I'm trying to form. Once I do that habit I'm trying to form, then I'll do a habit that I want, that I enjoy, that I like, right? So I've seen this suggested with like working out, right? I really want to binge this TV series that I love. And so, okay, well, I'm going to work out after I, change out of my work clothes. After I change out of my work clothes, I put on my workout clothes because I'm going to go work out. Well, when I'm working out or after I work out, then I'm allowed to watch the show that I want, right? And it inserts that like level of pleasure in, what you're trying to do, right? So you can use the habit stacking plus the habit bundling to get down to this. How do you make something really attractive?
It's kind of like maybe even when we grew up, right? Your parents said things like, read this chapter, then do your homework. And after you do your homework, you can go outside and play.
I use that with my son all the time.
Yeah. So we were trained that when we were little, but now we have to keep that as our habits going forward. So here we are at the end of chapter 8, but at the beginning of this second law. So the next time we get together, we are going to talk about the role of family and friends in shaping our habits. I hope you're getting value out of your time with us together. We're looking forward to continuing our exploration through Atomic Habits. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast, share it with others, and we'd also love to hear from you as well. Scott will have in our show notes ways for you to get in touch with us on our LinkedIn page called School of Thoughts. We'd love to hear your school of thoughts and how you are building these attractive habits in your life. So once again, on behalf of my friend Sam Powell, my name is Denise Russo. Thanks for joining us on this episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.